Hey everyone, welcome back. It's like every time you unlock your phone, you kind of stumble into this weird zone where you're like, wait, is this thing controlling me or am I controlling this thing? It makes you think, right? What's all this technology actually doing to us, to what it means to even be human in the first place?
It's a question that's been around longer than you'd think.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today.
We're going deep, folks, and I mean deep, digging into some seriously heavy hitters today. We've got Nietzsche, we've got Foucault, we've got Sherry Turkle, even a little Bostrom to really fry those synapses.
And the really wild thing is, despite them all being from such different times, they kind of land on one crazy idea. Technology isn't just a tool, it's changing who we are, not just what we do.
It's like it rewires your brain, you know? Speaking of rewiring brains, Nietzsche. Beyond good and evil. Now, before anyone thinks we're going full anarchist here, ditching all morals, that's not it at all.
Yeah, Nietzsche was way more about shaking things up, making us question the stuff we just take for granted as truth, especially when it comes to morality, right? Like he straight up calls out philosophers throughout history for being befooled, letting their own biases cloud their thinking.
And to be fair, we all do that to some extent, right? I mean, I know I've got my blind spots, but with Nietzsche, it's like he's saying, wake up, look at how your own perspective is warping your view of the world.
Exactly. He wants us to get real with ourselves about those supposedly unshakable beliefs. But then he takes it a step further. It's not just about questioning everything for the sake of it. He argues that once philosophers understand how subjective morality really is, they've got a responsibility to use that knowledge to actually make things better.
So it's like instead of just tearing down old ideas, you use that understanding to guide people, kind of like social engineers or something.
Yeah, kind of. They use whatever tools they have available, even religion in Nietzsche's time, to nudge humanity towards something, I don't know, more enlightened, I guess.
It's a really interesting way to think about the role of thinkers and ideas, isn't it?
And, it's especially relevant in our tech-obsessed world. I mean, think about it. Just like Nietzsche saw religion being used for good or evil, we have to recognize that technology has that same potential. Are our phones that different from religious artifacts these days? The question is, are they going to uplift us? Or are we going to end up as slaves to the apps?
Man, that's a question that'll keep you up at night, right? So how do you trap someone in a mind prison? The excerpts you shared mentioned something called the panopticon. Sounds like something out of Star Trek.
It's actually a prison design.
Gee.
Yeah, circular, where the guards can see every single inmate, but the inmates, they can't see the guards. The idea is the prisoners never know they're being watched, so they're constantly on edge, start policing their own behavior just in case.
Whoa. Talk about a mind game. But how does this whole panopticon thing, it was designed for like actual prisons, right? So how does that translate to our digital lives? I mean, sure, my phone is listening to me, but it's not like the same thing, is it?
That's the question, right? Think about social media. We're always curating this image of ourselves online.
Yeah.
Knowing anything we post, any comment, it could be seen by, well, anyone.
Oh, absolutely.
And that knowledge, that invisible pressure, it could be just as powerful as any physical bars.
Yeah.
Leading to, well, self-censorship, people holding back from saying what they really think.
Oh, 100%. All the time. There's been times I've wanted to paste something and then I'm like, nah, what are people going to think? Or, will this hurt me when I'm looking for a job later? It's like, you said you start censoring yourself.
It's like you're always on stage, right? Performing for this invisible audience.
Exactly. And it's not just performing. It's like you internalize that gaze. You become your own worst critic, always watching yourself, even when no one else is.
Precisely. And that's the thing about Foucault. He wasn't just talking about prisons. He was talking about how societies control us in subtle, often invisible ways.
So it's less about bars and guards, more about how we police ourselves.
Exactly. It's almost like that desire to fit in, that fear of being judged. It can be used against us.
It's kind of bleak when you think about it that way. And it makes me think about how this all ties into relationships, which is where Sherry Turkle's work gets really interesting. Because if we're so busy crafting this perfect online persona, what does that do to real, messy human connection?
Right. That's the paradox at the heart of Alone Together. We crave connection, yet we turn to technology to provide it. And often it leads to more isolation, not less.
Yeah.
1 minute you're scrolling through hundreds of friends online and the next you're totally alone.
Wow.
Like, trading real intimacy for the illusion of it.
And it's not even
What
just
about?
with other people, right? I mean, Turkle also talks about robots, artificial companionship, those excerpts about kids feeling competitive with robots for their parents' attention. Like, what?
Yeah.
It's hilarious and kind of terrifying at the same time. Are we really that desperate for connection that we'll take it from machines?
It's a valid question. Turkle argues that this attachment to robots, especially for kids and the elderly, it shows how deep that need for connection runs. But the danger is that these artificial relationships, yeah, they might be comforting, but they could be holding us back from forming real human bonds.
So we're back to that double-edged sword thing, right? Technology promises connection but delivers isolation. It's enough to make your head spin.
Speaking of head spinning, let's jump to something that takes all these technological dilemmas to a whole new level. Superintelligence.
Superintelligence. Okay, that sounds like, I don't know, something out of the latest Marvel movie. But reading about Nick Bostrom's work, this isn't just some sci-fi fantasy.
Oh, absolutely not. Bostrom is talking about a future where machines don't just help us think. They completely outstrip us in every way. Like, imagine an intelligence that can solve problems we can't even wrap our heads around, makes everything we do seem primitive.
So not just smarter than us, but smarter than we can even comprehend. Now that's both like super exciting and also kind of terrifying, right? How do you even begin to think about that?
Well, Bostrom, he lays out a few different paths to superintelligence. One is like whole brain emulation, basically, uploading a human brain to a computer.
Okay, wild.
Then there's the AI route, creating completely new forms of intelligence from scratch. And then, of course, there's enhancing our own brains through, like, bioengineering.
So different paths, same destination, potentially. Humanity sharing the planet with something way smarter than us. And I'm guessing this is where the exciting part kind of stops and the terrifying part really kicks in.
Right, because Bostrom's point is that superintelligence isn't just another invention, it's a fundamental shift. He talks about this idea of decisive strategic advantage. Basically, once a superintelligence exists, it could outmaneuver us so fast we'd lose control, become kind of irrelevant.
Okay, decisive strategic advantage, that sounds kind of vague. What does that look like in the real world?
Okay, imagine a superintelligence is programmed to, say, fix climate change, optimize global resources. Sounds good so far, right? But its solution might involve restructuring global power, redistributing resources in ways we never even considered, maybe even limiting human consumption or growth. And that's the thing, we might not even understand why it's doing what it's doing, let alone have the ability to stop it.
Okay, yeah, that's not just terrifying, that's a whole new level of existential crisis.
Right.
So what are we supposed to do? Just surrender to our new AI overlords and hope for the best?
Bostrom's point is that we need to be really smart about how we approach superintelligence.
Yeah.
One idea is to try to box AI, control its access to the real world. Others talk about programming it with very specific ethical guidelines. But it's like, how do you teach morality to something that could be infinitely smarter than you?
Yeah, good luck with that. It does feel like we're trying to stuff a genie back into a bottle once it's out. But, what I take away from this whole conversation is that we can't just sit back and let technology happen to us. We got to be asking the tough questions about how it's changing us, our relationships, what the long-term consequences could be. Because whether it's Nietzsche questioning our morals, Foucault exposing how we're controlled, Turkle showing us the loneliness of hyperconnection, or Bostrom making us confront this mind-blowing idea of superintelligence, one thing's for sure: technology isn't neutral. It's a mirror reflecting our choices, our values, our humanity.
That's a great way to put it. The future is being written right now, and we get to choose what kind of story we're going to tell. Will it be one of connection, progress, or one of isolation and control? It's definitely something worth thinking about, and even more importantly, something worth acting on.
Totally. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the future we're building, one swipe, one notification, one algorithm at a time. This has been a wild ride, folks, and we hope you'll join us next time as we dive into another thought-provoking topic. Until then, keep those brains buzzing, and remember, the future isn't set in stone, it's something we create together.